French-style protests here over soaring fuel prices. Horrific injuries as coach carrying Britain's crashes in America. Unions attack Blair's call for reform of comprehensive schools. And Christie's anger over more drug tests for his athletes.
From ITN, the ITV Nightly News with Nicholas Owen.
Good evening. British road hauliers and farmers adopted French tactics today and started blockades against the high price of fuel. In one of the biggest protests, a convoy of more than 100 lorries and tractors crawled up and down a section of the A1M near Gateshead on Tyneside, disrupting traffic for 3 hours. The leaders say there'll be more protests, and they're talking about a winter of unrest. ITN's Colin Baker reports.
The French lesson learned and borrowed, the truckers came to the end of their protest tonight. So delighted are they with their success, they're now threatening regular demonstrations on a weekly basis. They'd crawled at 5 miles an hour along the A1 near Gateshead, at most times one of the country's busiest routes. But this was at rush hour and guaranteed to make disruption unavoidable. The protest began late afternoon, attracting far greater support than either the police or organisers anticipated. Some of these drivers are one-man operators, a breed on the verge of becoming extinct, according to the industry, which says it can no longer sustain high prices and high taxes on diesel fuel. Others working for larger companies said that they'd been ordered by their managers to take part. Many of these vehicles cover around 3,000 kilometres a week. Craig Ely owns 7 lorries. His fuel bill, he says, is about to rise by £1,000 a month.
If fuel goes up any more from now till Christmas, we will really suffer, because now this is coming into our busiest time of the year. And if they put the fuel up any more throughout this and Christmas, we'll struggle.
Bill Headley agrees. He operates 12 lorries and says the situation at present is the worst he's known for 40 years.
It will happen again. I wouldn't like to see it when. Possibly next time the hauliers and farmers will not tell anybody, they'll just do it.
Taxi driver Glenn Borrell made a 300-mile round trip to take part. He spends £15 a day on fuel.
I don't think it's quite fair. That's why I feel so angry, because they're punishing my family.
Most of these drivers are from the northeast, and while there's no doubting their will to continue this protest, they do understand they cannot do it alone. So to be more effective, they're now planning a nationwide blockade. Colin Baker, ITN, on the A1 near Gateshead.
The focus of protests has switched tonight to South Wales, where lorry drivers and farmers are now attempting to blockade an oil refinery at Pembroke Dock. Our Wales correspondent Tim Rogers is there. Tim, what's happening?
Well, Nick, you can see possibly behind me about 100 farmers and lorry drivers who've combined here to blockade the Texaco oil refinery in Pembrokeshire. This is about the 3rd largest refinery in the country, and they were hoping to bring severe disruption. However, the oil here is pumped out to the rest of the country via a pipeline, so there won't actually be lorries moving in and out of here tonight for them to disrupt. But they all arrived here about an hour ago in convoy with their horns blaring and lights flashing, and they came because they wanted this to be a symbolic gesture. They were hoping that this would demonstrate solidarity with their colleagues who blockaded Stanlow Oil Refinery at Ellesmere Port last night. And while you can see about 100 or so, as I said earlier, outside the main gate here, this convoy actually stretches back about a quarter of a mile, and some of it is actually peeled off to go to another refinery, the Elf terminal at Milford Haven, where they understand there are other lorries coming and going.
Tim Rogers in South Wales, thank you. The groundswell of anger about what we're having to pay for petrol and diesel could spell danger for the government, which takes 3/4 of the forecourt price in tax. So far, it's given no hint of any concessions, but, as Joe Andrews reports, that could change.
The Prime Minister wasn't taking questions today about petrol prices, but his government, like the French, is now under increasing pressure on this issue.
These are not Trotskyite militants. They're decent, honest, hard-working people whose livelihoods are being destroyed by a government that said it wouldn't put up taxes, which has put up taxes and is destroying jobs.
The oil-producing countries meet this weekend and are expected to agree a small rise in production, but not enough to dampen prices which have tripled in the last 20 months.
People are prepared to pay more, they're prepared to pay more, but up to a point. You have to know where to stop. And I think we have signs now in France and the UK and everywhere else in the world that the consumers are unhappy.
The problem for Labour is that every time prices go up, so does its tax take, making it look greedy. But for now, ministers are sitting tight.
In the last budget, the Chancellor abolished the fuel duty escalator that the Tories had introduced. And for the first time for 11 years, there was no increase above inflation in the fuel duty in this country. He also took 400 million off road taxis at the last budget.
This, though, is a sensitive area for the government, especially with the prospect of a general election next year. And if it remains a hot issue this autumn, then watch the Chancellor's pre-budget statement in November for concessions. Jo Andrews, ITN, Westminster.
Teachers' unions have reacted angrily tonight to a call by the Prime Minister for reform of the comprehensive school system. One accused him of caricaturing the system as it now operates. Mr. Blair's call in a speech at the Cranfield School of Management was for the flexibility to make the most of every pupil, and he said it would mean big change.
Too often comprehensives adopted a one-size-fits-all mentality. No setting, uniform provision for all, hostile to the notion of specialisation and centres of excellence within areas of the curriculum. Modern comprehensives should be as dedicated as any private school or old grammar school to high achievement for the most able pupils.
Police in the United States believe the driver of a British tourist coach which crashed in Nevada may have fallen asleep at the wheel. Almost everyone on board was injured as the coach slid along the road on its side. 20 are still in hospital. ITN's James Mates reports.
The injuries were quite horrific. One 72-year-old woman has had both arms amputated at the elbow. 8 altogether are listed in serious condition. Even the teams of surgeons who greeted these British tourists at the main hospital in Las Vegas were shocked at the sight that met them.
There was multiple trauma, there were amputations, there was head injury, there was abdominal trauma. It was total catastrophe.
Driver error is being blamed. As they sped through one of the most remote corners of the Nevada desert, it appears he momentarily lost concentration, maybe even fell asleep.
Apparently it's due to driver error. The driver, for unknown reasons, kind of drifted off the right roadway edge, overcorrected to his left, went across both travel lanes, left the left side roadway edge, overcorrected again, came back to his right, and at that point in time, that's when the bus kind of overturned onto his left-hand side.
And that is when the passengers inside were sent tumbling down into contact with the road.
People were in contact with the ground as the bus was sliding for 300 or 400 feet, so there's very substantial injuries.
The 41 Britons were mostly in their 60s on a 2-week trip around the western USA. One who escaped unhurt remembered the sheer terror among his fellow travellers.
If you have a loved one with you, the way I had a wife with me, you'd be frightened, you'd be worried, you'd be upset, you'd be terrified, you'd be hearing people scream, you'd be seeing people bleed. It's a horrible experience. We are grateful that we are okay. We are extremely sorry for the people who are injured.
The coach has now been righted and towed away. Investigators will want to find out fast whether mechanical failure played any part in this horrendous accident. James Mates, ITN, in the United States.
One of Britain's highest-ranking policemen was cleared today of indecently assaulting 2 women. Ian Beckett, the Deputy Chief Constable of Surrey, was cleared of 4 charges of indecency by a jury at Southwark Crown Court. He may still face disciplinary proceedings on a number of separate allegations. The Home Secretary's younger brother, William Straw, had his name put on the sex offenders register for 5 years today after he was found guilty of indecently assaulting a girl of 16. Mr. Straw, an Open University administrator who was said to have been on antidepressants, was fined £750. Sussex police said tonight they'd had 200 calls from the public in response to their new appeal today for information about the murder of Sarah Payne. They're still trying to trace a lorry driver who they believe saw the killer's face. Adrian Britton reports.
The A29 in Sussex, where a man driving north remembers seeing a white van swerving out of this country lane a few yards from where Sarah's body was found. The witness says a lorry in front of him had to brake sharply to avoid a collision. The transit-style van was identical to the one seen by Sarah's brother 10 miles away at the spot where she was abducted. Like the vehicle used in July's reconstruction, it had no side or rear windows. It is 10 weeks since Sarah was murdered, and detectives believe the lorry driver they're searching for may have seen the face of her killer.
It could be that they are very, very vital. We don't know what details they took or what they can remember of the incident, but the timing is absolutely critical.
The white lorry had a logo of a tyre and spanner displayed on its rear doors, distinctive information remembered by the witness who saw the near accident at 11 o'clock at night on Saturday the 1st of July, 3 hours after Sarah's abduction. He also recalls the van being followed by the lorry for 4 miles along the A29 before the van driver turned off towards the village of Barnes Green. Astonishingly, despite nationwide appeals for sightings of white vans in this area, the lorry driver has never come forward, though police believe he may be anywhere in the country and has simply not connected his sighting with the murder of Sarah Payne. Adrian Britton, ITN, Sussex.
Bruce Gyngell, the Australian TV executive who rescued TVAM in the 1980s and then lost the franchise, has died of cancer at the age of 71. He was a favourite of Margaret Thatcher, and some of today's household names in television owe their careers to him. Here's Juliette Bremner.
His unorthodox style took British television by storm. As boss of TVAM, Bruce Gyngell turned a lacklustre breakfast show into a colourful and profitable business. He introduced Anne Diamond, the smiling face on the sofa that welcomed early morning audiences.
Nobody had ever really seen anything like him. He was this brash Australian who was single-minded and worked really from gut instinct, and he got up the nose of a lot of establishment broadcasters in this country.
Ulrika Johnson was the secretary he promoted to Weather Girl.
I didn't want to say that, did I? No.
She personified his cheerful approach to broadcasting.
He wanted to bring to them what he called at TVAM eternal summer, which was sunshine, and he would hate me today in black.
But it was his fight with the trade unions that endeared Bruce Gyngell to the Thatcherite government, who credited him with breaking the unions' grip on television. With such backers, he was confident of winning the 1991 auction of TV licences. When TVAM lost its franchise, there was a personal letter from Margaret Thatcher apologising for the bidding system she'd set up.
I was delighted that, to have that support. I mean, it's small consolation that we didn't and haven't got it. But nevertheless, we've got to go on and live for another day.
He never did hit the TVAM heights again, but had the consolation of being remembered in his native country as the first man ever to appear on Australian television. Juliette Bremner, ITN.
Some of the British athletes in Australia for the Olympics have been ordered to provide samples for drug tests. It was all very public, and Linford Christie, for one, didn't like it, as ITN's Mark Austin saw.
An Australian anti-doping official arriving at the British training camp on the Gold Coast. For the second day running here, the drug testers had the British team in their sights. More than 20 of its athletes tested in the last 24 hours, mainly in private. But today, among others, runners coached by Linford Christie were the targets of this pre-Olympic crackdown. And a very public process it was. Sprinter Darren Campbell and 400-metre runner Catherine Merry required to provide urine samples in the full glare of the media spotlight. A fact that irritated Christie and necessitated the intervention of Australian police.
Just to move back, please, and just to give these people some room to work, please.
The testers say these are routine, random tests, like the hundreds being carried out in the run-up to the Olympics. The irony, of course, is that the athletes are being coached by Linford Christie, himself serving a 2-year ban for drug abuse. Christie declined to speak on camera, but told me he wanted his athletes left alone to concentrate on the challenge ahead. Officials say there's no question Campbell and Merry were targeted because they're being coached by Christie. But once again, the drugs issue threatens to divert attention from the job all these athletes are here to do. And one sports scientist attached to the team believes some athletes testing positive after taking supplements are being branded cheats on questionable evidence.
If I could be sure they were cheats, I'd have no sympathy whatsoever. But we think there's a possibility that some of those who have failed tests may be quite innocent.
Next week, Mark Richardson, another British athlete trying to clear his name after testing positive for drugs, will arrive here not knowing whether he'll be allowed to take part in the Olympics or not. It seems the drug issue will continue to dominate here. Mark Austin, ITN, on the Gold Coast, Australia.
And the main news again. British road hauliers and farmers have started blockades in protest against high fuel prices. The biggest have been on the A1M in the northeast and tonight at Pembroke Dock in South Wales. And Tony Blair has called for big changes in the comprehensive school system. Tonight's financial figures, fears about the oil price wiped more than 88 points off the main 100 share index in London. It's now almost 200 points down on Monday's high. On Wall Street, the Dow closed almost 40 points down, and the pound is down again against the dollar, losing 1 3/4 cents today. It was also down against the euro. And now for a look at the first editions of tomorrow's newspapers. The Times leads with the petrol protests, which are gathering momentum in the UK. The paper claims hundreds of petrol stations will begin to dry up following the blockade of Stanlow refinery in Cheshire. The image is of the hole in the ozone layer, which is larger than ever. The Financial Times predicts a winter of discontent over fuel and shows today's protest at Gateshead. When will our petrol run dry, asked the Daily Mail. The paper claims 15 depots supply 80% of our fuel, and if the blockades continue, there could soon be shortages. Lord Faulkner, the minister responsible for the Dome, has admitted to the Daily Telegraph he made mistakes. He tells the paper the venue was beset by problems from the day it opened. The picture is of 2 leaders of the French truck drivers' blockade. Blair plans schools revolution is the Guardian's headline. The Prime Minister is planning to place talented children in special classes and give them access to extra specialised tuition. That's it from the ITV Nightly News. I'll be back here on Sunday evening. Do join me then. For now, good night. Have a good weekend.
Good evening. Surrey's Deputy Police Chief was cleared of sexual assault today, but his job still hangs in the balance. Ian Beckett was found not guilty of indecently assaulting 2 female colleagues at his forces headquarters in Guildford. But within minutes of the verdict, it emerged that Mr Beckett still faces other similar allegations. Ronke Phillips reports.
The highest-ranking officer ever to face criminal charges, Ian Beckett emerged from court cleared of all 4 charges of indecently assaulting 2 civilian workers. He refused to answer questions, but his solicitor read out a statement on his behalf.
I and my family are relieved that the right verdicts were reached in a case that has caused us enormous trauma. I now ask that I may return to the privacy and dignity of my family life. Of course, I look forward to returning to the Surrey Police Service as its committed Deputy Chief Constable.
But a return to his old post may be a long way off. It's now been revealed that the police are investigating Mr Beckett for other disciplinary matters of a similar nature.
The investigating officer has recommended to us that we consider taking disciplinary action in relation to a series of instances which relate, generally speaking, to harassment, and the authority will be doing that in the first instance on Monday.
During the trial, prosecutor Sally Bennett-Jenkins had accused Beckett of considering himself the top dog. She said he'd abused his position to carry out serious sexual assaults at Surrey Police Headquarters in 1998. But Beckett told the jury the allegations were lies and fantasy. The jury, made up of 10 men and 2 women, believed him and acquitted him on all 4 charges. This may have been the verdict Ian Beckett was hoping for, but this case clearly isn't over. Both Surrey Police and the Police Authority will be meeting their legal teams over the weekend to decide if further disciplinary action will be taken. At Southwark Crown Court, this is Ronke Phillips for London Tonight.
The charity behind a spectacular new temple in northwest London is under investigation. The £7 million Hindu place of worship is under construction in Alperton. The Charity Commission has launched a formal inquiry into the Indian religious charitable organisation that owns the building company. Reading Magistrates Court was under armed guard today as 6 people appeared accused of helping 2 men escape from Slough Magistrates Court last month. The 5 men and 1 woman are charged with aiding and abetting the 2 defendants who escaped when masked men burst into the court firing guns. Scotland Yard's most senior Asian officer has received race hate mail at his office in central London. Detectives are investigating whether the letters to Deputy Assistant Commissioner Tariq Ghaffur are part of a wider campaign against black and Asian officers. Arsenal striker Kanu has had his Mercedes sports car stolen following a raid on his home in North London. Cash, gems and medals are also reported to have been taken from the Nigerian international's house in Hadley Wood. Meanwhile, a man has been charged with stealing hundreds of pounds worth of designer clothes from Victoria Beckham. Posh Spice reported several pieces of luggage missing after flying back to Heathrow from Miami in April this year. Self-employed refuse collector Mark Oliver, who's 20, will appear at Uxbridge Magistrates Court in a week's time. A reconstruction of Shakespeare's Rose Theatre has been given the go-ahead by Islington Council. The plans are backed by Dame Judi Dench, who wants to include the theatre set from the film Shakespeare in Love, the movie that won her an Oscar. The reconstruction is under a housing development at Islington Green and should be ready by summer 2002. And that's it for now. We'll be back tomorrow afternoon with London Today at 1:20 and London Tonight at 5:05. Until then, have a very good night.
Quite a sticky night to come, a lot of moist air across the London area, some patchy rain and also some mist patches. Temperatures probably no lower than around 17 Celsius. Tomorrow morning, starting on a cloudy note again, we could see some mist and drizzle, but through the day, a slow improvement. The cloud could actually thin in one or two spots, allowing a little bit of sunshine to come through. And if we do see some sunshine, up to around 22 Celsius. As for Sunday, a similar theme to the weather, a lot of cloud, a hint of brightness and some mist patches along the coast.